Hello, you beautiful people. So, I'm pretty sure that you're interested in Madam Herta, and now that you've already clicked on this video, I'm guessing you want all the details that we have on her kit and how she functions overall, right? Lucky for you though, you've managed to click on the absolute perfect video to get all that juicy info. Today, I'm mainly going to discuss about Madam Herta's entire kit, including her basic abilities, her talent, her traces, her light cone, and her Eidolons as well. Honestly, I have to say, I really love how Madam Herta's entire kit functions, but I might be a bit biased in that because I just really like Madam Herta as a character overall. Before we begin, if you want some discounts on your Stellar Jade packs, let me just tell you about this site called LD Shop. This site is honestly a great top-up center, and the top-up process is really easy as well because all you need to do is select your pack and enter your UID and server in this box right here. Yep, that's the entire top-up process. After waiting for a few minutes in the game, I easily received my jades and also saved a little bit of money. By the way, if you register in LD Shop from my link in the description or the pinned comment, you will get an extra 5% off on top of all the other discounts. Alright, just a quick little info that if you spend more than $80 in a single month on LD Shop, you can get a VIP membership for yourself, and if you're curious what this membership does, it basically provides you with a free monthly pass, weekly discount coupons, and some monthly discount coupons as well. Okay, moving on from the sponsor, just keep in mind the usual disclaimer that this version of Madam Herta's kit is not the final one and changes will most likely be made to it, so take all this info with a grain of salt. With that being said, let's begin without wasting any more of your time or energy. Starting with the very basics, the Herta is an ice-type unit who follows the path of erudition, and she plays the role of a main DPS on your team. Her playstyle mainly revolves around marking her enemies with her abilities and through her teammates, and then she detonates all these marks with her enhanced skill to deal insane amounts of damage to all enemies present on the field. Regarding her release date, according to the new banner system coming to HSR in patch 3.0, Madam Herta's banner will be up as soon as patch 3.0 goes live on January 15th for the Asia servers, and January 14th for the America ones. By the way, if you want to know more details about this new banner system, go check out my previous video that I made on it. Anyways, let's move on from all this basic stuff and time to finally discuss the Herta's kit in detail. Okay, as usual, starting with her basic attack, it's a very generic and useless basic attack because all it does is deal a little bit of ice damage to a single target, and that's pretty much it. Yep, ideally you will never want to use Madam Herta's basic attack in a battle, and you genuinely don't need to worry about this ability at all. Next up, taking a look at her skill, remember how I just mentioned that her entire kit revolved around marking her enemies with some specific type of stacks? Well, she gains these stacks most consistently with her regular skill, which deals a little bit of ice damage to a single enemy, and along with this, she also applies stacks of something called interpretation to the target. Other than dealing damage and applying stacks to a single enemy, Madam Herta additionally deals a second hit of blast damage twice to the main designated target and to the adjacent targets as well, totaling up to 3 hits. All in all, her skill's main purpose is to be her primary source of consistently generating stacks of interpretation and dealing some okay damage on the side. By the way, don't worry about these stacks of interpretation for now, and I'll discuss more about them when we talk about her talent later on. Alright, moving on, her skill also generates a nice amount of energy for Madam Herta to use her ultimate, which is a really important part of her kit as it gives her access to her main damaging ability. So, discussing about Madam Herta's ultimate, this ultimate starts off with rearranging the stacks of interpretation across all enemies to focus them onto elites or bosses. Then it deals a ton of AoE ice damage to all the enemies present on the field. Now, finally on top of all that AoE damage, her ultimate also gives her a free 100% action advance, which pretty much means that she takes a turn after using her ultimate, and along with this, it also allows her a single use of her enhanced skill. You're probably thinking that this is a lot of things for an ultimate to do, right? Well, I would say all of these utilities provided by her ultimate are quite justified because her ultimate cost is a huge total of 220 energy, which is the second highest ultimate cost in the game after Firefly's ultimate. Luckily though, she has a lot of ways to regenerate some extra bits of energy here and there, so don't worry about this too much for now. Anyways, let's finally take a look at Madam Herta's main damaging ability, which is her enhanced skill. Okay, since her ultimate cost is this extreme, luckily it does mean that the reward is also extremely huge because her enhanced skill is quite literally one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. This enhanced skill deals 4 instances of damage in total, which includes the first instance, which deals a decent bit of ice damage to a single designated target. After this first instance, Madam Herta deals 2 instances of blast damage to the main target and adjacent targets as well. Lastly, after these 3 instances, Madam Herta just takes her Keyblade and deals a huge amount of AoE ice damage to all the enemies present on the field. And I would say the multipliers for all the attacks performed by her enhanced skill are quite decent as well. Overall, I would say her enhanced skill is already really decent, but it isn't even at its final form yet, because Madam Herta's talent is also focused around buffing her enhanced skill even more. Well, seeing as I've already mentioned it, let's move on from her basic abilities and take a look at the Herta's talent next. So, her talent buffs her already insane enhanced skill even more by increasing the damage multiplier based on how many interpretation stacks you have on the enemy. Yep, all those stacks that you gained from her skill and other sources directly boost the damage of her enhanced skill. And this increase is quite huge at the max amount of stacks because it's a direct damage increase of around 2 times on the primary target and 50% more damage on all other targets as well. You're probably thinking her enhanced skill is already really broken, right? Well, her talent buffs her enhanced skill even more because it states that if there are 2 or more erudition characters in the team, this damage increase from the interpretation stacks is doubled, going up to 3 times the original damage on the primary target and 2 times of the original damage on all the other enemies present on the field. Now, do keep in mind that these interpretation stacks are consumed whenever Madam Herta uses her enhanced skill, so you will have to stack all the way up again after you use it for the maximum amount of damage. And that's where the main drawback of her enhanced skill comes, as the max amount of interpretation stacks that you can have is 42. Realistically, unless you are in pure fiction or a 5-target scenario, you will most likely never see those interpretation stacks going over 30. So you probably won't be able to reach her max damage potential either unless you get her Eidolons that help with stacking. All in all though, I would say her talent is actually really good and synergizes perfectly with her entire kit, especially her enhanced basic attack. Next up, let's quickly take a look at her technique before moving on to her major traces. So, I think you all know by now that stacking up these interpretation stacks is really important for Madam Herta's kit, right? Well, her technique helps quite a lot with that because it provides her with a really nice 40% attack boost for 2 turns, and along with this, it also inflicts 4 stacks of interpretation on all enemies at the start of each wave. Okay, I know her technique sounds just okay at first glance, but I would say it's much stronger than you think due to the way her ultimate works, since it will rearrange the stacks and prioritize them onto the elites and bosses. This straight up equates to 20 stacks in a 5-target scenario for doing absolutely nothing, which makes her technique one of the stronger ones in the game, as it does literally everything for her. By the way, her technique has a special effect in the simulated universe, just like Ruan Mei's technique, which is just admin powers, I guess. But I thought most of you guys wouldn't be interested in it, so I'll just show what her technique does in the SU in this small section. Alright, with that, we're done discussing Madam Herta's entire basic kit in detail. Without wasting any time, let's move on and take a look at her major and minor traces next. First of all, these are Madam Herta's minor traces, and honestly, I like all of them quite a lot because none of them are wasted stats, and she can easily utilize all of these extra stats without wasting anything. Next up, I would say Madam Herta's major traces are kind of like a mixed bag, because she has 2 amazing traces that benefit her kit heavily, but she also has a really useless one that doesn't really do anything for her kit at all. Starting with the first trace, this trace makes it so that whenever an ally attacks an enemy, this particular ally inflicts 1 stack of interpretation on this designated enemy, and for every enemy that gets hit by this ally, Madam Herta will gain an additional 3 energy. This means that Madam Herta has great synergy with characters who can attack frequently and do AoE hits like Lingsha, Aventurin, or even Jade. Jade is funnily enough her best erudition partner, by the way, because as you kind of need one erudition character to take full advantage of her amazing trace 2 and talent. Moving on to her second trace, this trace gives the Herta a whopping 80% crit damage for the small requirement of simply just having an erudition teammate on your team. And this part alone makes her second trace really synergistic with her first trace and her talent as well. Now, along with some extra crit damage, This trace also grants an additional interpretation stack whenever allies attack, meaning that whenever an ally hits an enemy, this ally now applies an additional stack to the enemy who is inflicted with the highest amount of interpretation stacks. Welp, we're somehow still not done with this trace, because this trace directly buffs her energy regeneration, so that the minimum amount of energy regenerated by Madam Herta after an ally attacks an enemy is 9. Basically, this trace makes it so that even after an ally just hits a single enemy on the field, it would still regenerate 9 energy for Madam Herta. This is why Jade is so good for the Herta, as she not only does frequent attacks to help provide some extra energy and stacks for Herta, but she also fills out the need for an erudition character, making her the best ally for the Herta. Madam Herta can also be easily paired with her 4-star version though, because Mini Herta does similar things to Jade, but just slightly worse, which is honestly understandable. Anyways, moving on to her final trace, this is kind of a useless trace for her, as it simply just makes her ultimate do bonus damage based on the amount of stacks you have, which at max increases its damage multiplier by 1.5 times the damage. This sounds really good on paper, but when you realize that her ultimate is not even 25% of her total damage, you start to realize how useless this trace actually is. Especially when you further consider that you realistically won't have more than 75 stacks on all enemies, meaning you won't even max this out in reality. So hopefully this gets changed in the future to something a little more useful. With that, we're finally done discussing Madam Herta's entire kit in detail, and I have to say, there were quite a lot of useless words in her entire kit. I tried my best to make her kit as simple as possible though, so I really hope you guys understood my explanations. I know that a lot of you are probably pulling for her light cone and her Eidolons as well, so let's take a quick look at those next. Starting with her light cone, it's like actually really simple, but it's an extremely good light cone because it provides her with 12% crit rate and boosting her ultimate and skill damage by 48% after she uses her ultimate, which lasts for 3 turns. This is conveniently how long Herta's ultimate rotation usually takes, so you will have a full 100% uptime on this passive most of the time. This light cone additionally gives her a skill point back with the condition of using an ultimate whose cost is above 140 energy, and with Madam Herta's insanely absurd 220 cost ultimate, she will be getting that skill point every time it's available. Yep, a really good light cone, and you should definitely consider going for it after getting an E0 Madam Herta. Lastly, let me quickly tell you guys about her Eidolons for the people who want to vertically invest in her. Okay, so the Herta's E1 and E2 are really good early Eidolons to aim for, because her E1 just lets her have around 30% more stacks of interpretation. And her E2 quite literally makes her the best DPS in the entire game, as it says that now whenever an ally attacks an enemy, this ally applies a total of 3 stacks on interpretation as compared to the previous 2 stacks, and along with this, her E2 makes it so that whenever an enemy reaches 42 stacks of interpretation, Madam Herta gains an additional enhanced skill. Yep, you can see how broken her E2 is because it's essentially doubles her damage by giving her an extra enhanced skill, which is like her main damage source. Her E4 and E6 aren't really worth going for in my opinion, but if you've already planned to E6 Madam Herta without caring about the strength of her Eidolons just like one of my friends, well, who am I to stop you, right? Alright, that was all the info that we have on Madam Herta's entire kit as of now. Overall, I would say her kit is quite solid and she is probably going to dominate the pure fiction game mode, but I feel like she'll be really good in the other game modes, namely Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow as well. I honestly love her playstyle of slowly building stacks onto the enemy with your skills and with the help of your allies, and then unleashing a huge enhanced skill onto the enemies which deals a ton of damage. Do remember to comment how you guys feel about her kit though, because I'm actually quite curious how you guys feel about her kit. Also, if you managed to watch until the end and enjoyed the video, do consider subscribing to the channel as well. With that being said, I just want to say I love y'all and I will see you in another one.